Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of SEO, The Other Stuff. Today, we're going to be talking about getting SEO a seat at the table. So how do we get other people to play along with our madness and do some of the things we actually need them to do? A couple of things we're going to talk about today is that getting a seat at the table. How do we be part of the bigger planning, making SEO more relevant to the organization, and then how do we get and share data between other people? So we actually have two great guests with us today. First up is Cindy Yerkie from Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, and Cindy's been around for a while doing things, and she's the global head of SEO there at HPE. So welcome, Cindy.
Thank you.
And Cindy, where are you coming in from? Where are you currently sitting?
I'm in the Colony, Texas, just outside of Dallas.
Okay, great. And also with us is Bill Scully. Bill Scully is the CEO of Digital Marketing Fuel. So it's his own company. Bill's also, like Cindy, been in the enterprise and has decided to go and share that wealth of knowledge with other size businesses. And so, Bill, where are you coming from today?
Just above Hartford, right between New York and Boston.
Okay, so just down the street from me. So I'm also in Hartford, Connecticut. Okay, so a couple of things while we're letting people join. So usually takes people a few minutes to get set up at this time of day. Couple fun facts. So Cindy, one of the things that I know about you is that Halloween's a big deal, and you actually like to do some pretty big decorations. And I understand last year you actually created a flying saucer to have for the decoration.
Yeah, we actually do the entire house. And last year, my husband and I spent time building a flying saucer, a cryo chamber, even had a morgue put in with an alien in it. But what was really cool, we did all this work, and the things that people thought were really great was having a little cow at the end of the flying saucer, so it looked like the cow was being sucked up by the flying saucer. And then we had these little aliens in jars that looked like little fetus aliens, and they thought that was really cool. So we kind of thought, wow, we built this cryo chamber, we did all this work, but that's what they enjoyed. And behind me, for those that can see it, you can see some of the Star Wars stuff that we had up last year in our Star Wars room.
So you're literally in the Star Wars room talking about the some of the future things of search. So that's pretty cool. And Bill, I know you're pretty active in the Special Olympics, being a coach. And one thing I didn't know is that you had created the first special needs division here in Connecticut and have been helping roll that out in other parts of the U.S. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I created the first special needs soccer division in Connecticut, and I helped distribute video nationally on how to start one in your town. I have a high-functioning special needs son, and when he turned 5, I did a lot of digging and couldn't really find any sports that he could participate in. And my neighbor was on the board of directors for the town soccer division. We have a pretty big soccer town league with about 800 kids. And the two of us got scheming together to try and get the board to approve the creation of a special needs soccer division for all ages, because we wanted it to be inclusive and we needed adaptable equipment. I actually went out and got a grant from Adidas for I think about $2,000. And what that did was that got us our own goals and some adaptable equipment so that we could have a field set it up in a special place where you normally wouldn't play soccer because it was surrounded by a fence. As an example of some of the things we got, we had one child that was blind, so we got a couple soccer balls that made noise.
Oh wow!
And
Cool.
We had a few kids in wheelchairs, so we were trying different things and trying to work with colleges to try and get some adaptive things made. But there were no other teams like this around, so we had reached out to a team in Pennsylvania and Texas to figure out, how to get this done. We didn't have any experience with this. I think we started with about 8 kids, and after about 2 years, we had learned so much, and we had kids, I think, coming from about probably from about 9 or 10 different towns, that we decided that we needed to really create an outreach program and teach other towns how to do it. So one of the coaches helped raise money to professionally record, produce, and distribute a video on how to start one in your own town.
That's great. So I think, all of those things you just talked about is finding who's doing it, what to do. There's nothing out there. And I know when I started in search, there was nothing. There was no real roadmap. We sort of made it up as we went along. And one of the things that we try to do is share like this with other people. But Bill, a couple of things that you mentioned, I think, fit perfectly into this topic today is really, both of you come out of the enterprise, and one of the things we have to do there is try to scale things. And the biggest way we can scale it is to get other people to do it. And one of the things that I've often sort of ranted about is that a good portion of what we do as SEOs is, I've jokingly said, make sites that don't deserve to rank. But real it is fixing other people's broken workflow. And so, recently I told a CMO when he asked me what's my job, because I was there as a consultant, I said, it's eliminate the need for SEO. And so if, and we didn't mean literally remove it, that you fire the SEOs or the agencies or anything, but that we integrate it into the process. And it sounded like that was some of the things that you did as part of this is figure out how can we adapt the current system. And I want to circle back to Cindy, because I think this is an area that you're very experienced with. I don't know how many people know, but HP, Hewlett Packard, was Hewlett Packard, and then decided they wanted to be two companies, Hewlett Packard and Hewlett Packard Enterprise. One kept all the cool toys and computers and things like that. The other one got pretty much everything else, and that's the side Cindy sits on, with servers and all kinds of consulting practices. And I think one of the big challenges for you, Cindy, was there was two. One was the migration. And as part of the migration, you had to stand up a separate site, and it actually gave you a number of opportunities, to integrate this. But the most recent, we'll circle back to the migration, but the e-commerce. So you had to stand up a new e-commerce. They wanted a new system. They were going to basically change everything. So I remember you telling me that, never in your history there had you really been part of any planning or process. Can you tell me about that? What you did, who you talked to, how you were able to get a seat at the table way before the first line of code was written to try to make this more effective?
Sure. Yeah, it was pretty interesting and kind of ended up getting there in a roundabout way. So back at the time, we had an e-commerce platform, but I didn't have anything really to do with it. I was running the marketing side of the business. I didn't really have insight into who was even doing e-commerce. And one day I just had this epiphany. Okay, I want to do an audit on the e-commerce site and then go to them, because I had been there and it was pretty crappy. And I said, okay, let's do an audit and come up with some things and go to them and show them how they could do things better. And so we took this to their management, and they were like, oh, wow, we didn't realize that that's why we weren't getting natural search traffic. And so we continued to work with them and told them, hey, fix 2 or 3 things for us and see how this helps. And they did, and all of a sudden they were getting indexed, and they had traffic coming into the site. And so we went back and said, look, results are good. You want to continue? We've got all these other things you could fix, and we'll help you with it. And they said, well, actually, we're going to go to a new platform, and they would love it if we could be a part of that and work with that process. And so we kind of got there by being proactive and not reactive. We went there with just an idea to help someone, and it turned out that they really did want our help, and they were going to the platform. We got a seat at the table where we could be there right from before day one. And with that, they liked everything we were doing so much during the early stages that we were able to hire someone full-time to work on this. So it was a pretty good deal.
Yeah. Well, I think what was interesting is that you took the initiative. You went to them and said, hey, and I think a lot of people are time challenged. And so if they don't ask, we don't tell. But I think that's what I think a lot of people experience is if you maybe come to them in a non-threatening manner, like you said, hey, we found a couple things. Can you fix this? And then, being part of the migration and the rebuild, I think was pretty great. We're seeing now a variety of people, just to give you guys, Cindy and Bill, who's listening in. We have people from the Bay Area in California, Florida, England, Colorado, a couple places in Michigan, Brazil, Toronto. So we got people from all over the place that are listening in, some from a variety of different size companies. And so for those that are just joining, we've got Cindy Yerkie and Bill Scully, and we're talking about how to get the seat at the table. And Cindy just went through how she was able to by basically going to a business unit and saying, hey, here's some things we found and we can fix it. One of the things, Bill, that you did when you were at Siemens, another very big company, is you created a digital center of excellence. Can you sort of tell us what that is and why maybe that's not just for big companies? It's for really, even if you're a smaller company. So what is a digital center of excellence, and how did you get it started, and how can other people use it?
Sure. Well, let me give you a little background on that. So, Siemens is a very progressive company, and it's a global matrix, really complicated. The way this got started was before there was actually the term Center of Excellence or expertise. So I was running digital marketing team including the web, and for one of their global divisions. And because of my passion, I had kept SEO and PPC for myself. The US had two other global headquarters and a US headquarters. And between us, we had about a dozen digital marketers that would get together a couple times a year to share best practices, which is really back then unheard of in big companies. Then the German headquarters learned about this and our success and started to participate. And it became apparent really quickly that we were all individually looking at tech deck roadmaps and marketing plans for the same customers, wasting time because we're each going through the vetting process and hitting the same customers. And in some cases, even for PPC, we were basically raising bids because everybody was bidding on the same terms. So a few of us got together and we pitched to corporate to create a cross-functional team where about a half a dozen of us were contracted to spend 25 to 50% of our time as global SMBs, subject matter experts, they were called. I was in search, but our mission, as we proposed it, was to increase digital adoption while reducing costs. And that was when we rolled up all the costs that we knew about and the monies that we could save, it was easy for them to make that investment in this team. That team became a center of expertise. Now they have a big corporate center of expertise that works out of Germany. But the beauty of a center of expertise is you have experts that you can rely on. You have people that can put together either formal or informal processes or rules of engagement. And I think that the real goal is to help build bonds within the company of people doing the same things, share best practices, and gain those advantages.
So I think that's the key, isn't it? That sharing the information, because I've been in meetings where the head of web development comes in and they have a laundry list of things to do and problems, and then you're there, from an SEO perspective, sometimes giving them even more things to worry about. I think one of the points you made is sharing best practices. So I think if we can teach them some of the things we have to do from an SEO perspective, and they integrate it into their workflow, we can get some scale out of that. So who are some of the people you might bring to this? So let's say I'm not a Siemens or an HP, but maybe I'm I don't know, $5 million company, a little smaller. Who would I invite to like the first meeting, and who do I think could benefit from this type of relationship?
For this type of group, it would be anyone who has an investment in the success of the company. I would say that could impact either the work you're doing, or you could impact the work they're doing. So obvious would be sales management, marketing management, product managers. Those people could have input into your work. I think, for a $5 million company, you probably have a digital marketer or two. So it's not your typical center of expertise, but more of a group of people with a shared interest in the success of the company.
Right. But I think the one person you mentioned on sales, so a lot of times sales is there and they're doing their thing and they're not necessarily thinking about search. So one of the things, could we or should we invite the salesperson just to show them what people are looking at? One thing that I find very successful is showing salespeople what people are looking for with site search. And that often tells them what people actually want in many cases after the sale. And so, like Cindy did with going to the e-commerce team and saying, here's some things we found. I think sharing keyword data with sales team, with the marketing team, with, even talking to product managers, even a 5-person company probably has somebody in charge of product, and letting them see the way people look for their widgets is a great way to start. Sharing some of the reports that you can get out of Semrush. These are all the words. One that I get asked for a lot by friends, less big companies, but friends are like, hey, is there any way you can tell me what people are looking for related to my business? So I think things like that, just telling them what people are interested in, is a great way to start. And I think I want to come back to something with you, Cindy. Your team recently won an award from Sempo for the best SEO, and you were a runner up for the Landies for best in-house team. And I remember one of the things that I heard that they liked from both of these was the way you reached out to the content team about what is queries and answer boxes. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of, one, what gave you the idea to look at that, and two, what was sort of the messaging you took to the team to get them to play along?
One of the things that we did was actually we started to look in Google Search Console as far as what were people actually searching for. And we used both Semrush and Data Prism to figure out, okay, these are some keywords that we really need to be going after. And what we found when we were doing this research is that people weren't just looking at keywords anymore. They weren't just, Google wasn't presenting our type of content, being a more of a marketing site. They weren't presenting that well anymore for us in search results. What they were looking for was content that answered a question and was contextual. And so rather than see our rankings and our traffic go down, we wanted to be proactive again. And we started to talk to our content owners and our businesses about the fact that we really needed to start going after this, what is like artificial intelligence. And we started to build content around this, and the SEO team took this upon themselves to write the content and get it published. And the businesses were thinking at first, well, this is kind of silly. I really don't see the need for this. But then all of a sudden we started getting answer boxes, and the increase in our answer boxes went up like 1,400%. And we found that the businesses are now coming to us and saying, hey, we want more of these answer boxes because we're ranking, we're doing better. It's bringing awareness into our site. And so the way that we're showing up in position 0, it's allowing us to show up in mobile devices and just helping us overall. So by collaborating with the content owners and explaining this to them, they're now gung-ho and ready to go, and our management is all excited about it as well. And it's even pushing us into more voice search queries and things like that.
So it sounds like, in a number of cases, in Bill's case, in yours, just giving people a couple really cool, innovative ideas that they may not have thought about, at least sort of get you the meeting. So like what
Right.
you found with answer boxes, and Bill, as you found with sharing certain data points, it definitely gets people there. And the whole reason we're trying to elevate this is that so much of what other people do actually negatively or positively impact our search performance. And I'm going to circle back to Cindy again, to you, because I alluded to this split divestiture, or whatever the politically correct name is, it when the cool hardware stayed one place and everything else went to HPE. With a split like that, the first thing we as search people think about is, the links. It's like, who keeps the dog?
Right.
Fortunately, it was, from what I understand, fairly amicable, so you can work with them to say, hey, keep linking to us here. But that's an interesting challenge, is when you take literally half the company and half the content, stand it up on a brand new domain, and what are all the implications of that? And so, I would think that while that's a massive task, did anybody think to add you to that process?
No. Again, anytime we've had like major changes and upheavals like that, people don't ask us to join. We always have to kind of insert ourselves. So one of the things we did with this particular split was we kept our eye on it, because we didn't even know ourselves, were we going to be with HP or were we going to be with HPE? We didn't know at the time. And but as soon as we heard the company was splitting, we became again proactive, and we started to create a book on what everything we would want in a site, making sure, from things like you were talking about, all the 301s and the mapping of what pages would be coming with us and what pages would stay. We started to make all the requirements in this big book. And when we finally heard it was HPE we were like, oh, this is going to be really cool, because this is a brand new site. And we'll be able to start from the ground up and build it the way we'd want. And so we created all this documentation, including some checklists on just some quick checks of a page before they went out. And we took them to management and said, hey, as you design and develop the site, we really want to have a seat at the table. We want to have this, part of it, SEO as part of this new site. And they looked at us and said, well, we're going live in 2 months, and we have to get this site built right now. So we've hired a third party. They're going to be in stealth mode, and no one's to talk to them. And we were like, oh, wonderful. And so we said, but we kept begging, and I swear daily, I don't know how many times between me and one other person, we were just begging our management to get in the door. And so finally they opened the door for us, and we were able to talk and discuss some of the SEO requirements. And even though they had our book that we had delivered, they were still not doing some of the things quite right. They didn't quite understand what we had written down. So we were able to, luckily, with the first, before it went live, 2 weeks before it went live, we fixed quite a few things, and then it did roll out the door with a few issues that we corrected over the next several months. But we were able to show management, hey, look, they did our fixes, they got in, and look at how well the site's doing right out the door. We didn't lose 30% of the traffic that we thought we would. Our traffic actually stayed pretty high. And on top of that, with the changes that we're currently fixing, and we would show them the results of those, it was like, oh, they saw the benefit of having included us. And so the next time they had a major template change, we were right there at the start. So again, being proactive and just being kind of forceful, talking to people, trying to get in the door, we were able to get there. And because we showed improvement with data, that helped too. And now they understand, to get us right in at the beginning.
And so I want to circle back. We've got a couple people have posted. So when are you going to get to people with no money and no budgets and small teams? And quite honestly, I think that everything Cindy just said, if we took out HP from that equation, it's exactly the same. If you're a startup, because in Cindy's case, is exactly the same way. They split the company. They had no website. They didn't even have the domain.
Right.
They had to acquire the domain. So it was the exact same thing as a startup. I think even more like a startup because the dev team, which was a third party in stealth mode. So you've got somebody offside building this wonderful site that's going to be for your new startup or your small company website. In their case, they didn't have a limited budget, but they didn't really allocate, from what it seems, any real money specifically to SEO. And so
Right.
unpacking a couple of those things, Cindy said, number one is whomever is building this site for whatever size company, give them some basic requirements. If you have zero money and somebody's building you a website, the easiest way to eliminate or minimize the need to do SEO later is put SEO requirements into your acceptance checklist. It's amazing how many people assume, and I came from two very large agency groups, and we tried to sell SEO as part of every website that was built. And their view was, let's build it, and then we can sell them $100,000 worth of SEO after it's built. And after you get sued a couple times because apparently you have the knowledge to make it search friendly, you start thinking about this. So I think for small people, small sites, limited budgets, startups, as much of your SEO requirements as you can integrate into the specification for the new site and put in very specific acceptance criteria, meaning this will accept this website when it does X. The more of those you put in as your upfront acceptance criteria, the more likely those things are going to make it into the build, because they can't sign off on the final check for the website unless those are there. And that does, pivot into the question I had from you, Bill. You've worked with different size companies. And so, the question we got from Peter was that, small companies, startups, people with limited or no money, what do you suggest they do? How does maybe the part-time marketing person that's sort of been anointed the SEO or the paid search person, how did they get heard when there's no money to do any of these things? I mean, what are ways we can sort of get that seat when there's no money to do a lot of these?
I think large and small companies have the same issues, and I think you can use the same approach for a lot of different things. So let me give you an example for large, and then it almost answers the question for small. But when big companies put together plans, there might be a headcount. Using a specific example, there might be a headcount for one SEO. That person probably doesn't even have a budget, and obviously, their job is to increase organic. And there might be other people that write content, or that person might also be responsible to create content. But in a big company outside of marketing communications, no one has a KPI with an objective for search. So it's really important to approach individuals that can help you, speaking to them in their language, and figure out what can help or hurt their personal goals. That's the same for large and small. The easiest people to approach, like you mentioned earlier, product managers, product marketing managers, salespeople. You might have a wealth of graphs and tables, But really what you want to do is you want to find the leaders, you want to invite them to coffee, you want to find out, what's important to them, how you can help them. Nobody has time to do more work, so don't ever approach them with, how can they help you? So have that meeting. Ask them, what is it you do? What are you responsible for? How's it going? Don't leave that first meeting without having a list of competitors and a couple of the main keywords that support their objectives. And schedule a follow-up meeting within a week to present some competitive data after that. And it's important to keep the momentum because in large and small companies, priorities shift, and once you're no longer on the radar, it's really hard to get back on that radar. So,
right.
Get that meeting, have that, you want to build the relationship before you start hammering them for keywords and budgets. And we have a wealth of information, and all of the tools that we have can spit out tables. That's great for SEOs, but it's not for other people. So when you meet with them that second time, you want to create something that is valuable to them, that they can actually repurpose and share to their boss or their teams. I would suggest at minimum you create a single analysis for each competitor they gave, and an analysis on the couple of keywords that they gave you. In most big companies, the way you do this is a PowerPoint deck, and I've had coffee with people where I basically print out the PowerPoint deck as I'm going through it with them, and offer to send it to them later. What you're doing is you're helping them, you're giving them information to provide that makes it look like they've done the work themselves. You start to build this relationship. The goal is really to have an opportunity where they'll want to meet with you in the future. And you'd be surprised. Over time, you can ask to be invited to their meetings. So, I've been invited to executive meetings in big companies, and in small companies, not so much. But it's not unusual for me to get an email on a Friday night from an owner of a $15-20 million company, where they want to have information about competitors. That to me is a win. Like anytime anybody who's above the level of actually producing the work asks you a question, I feel I've done my job.
And I think that's key. It's like, I think one thing, the help me help you type thing. And then I don't want to circle back to free and no budget. There's this idea that big companies have unlimited budgets. When I was at IBM, I had no budget. The whole budget went to pay me. And the number one thing that I used to use to get people to understand the importance and why I needed to talk to the people, and going back to this, what can I do for free? Well, the biggest thing you can do for free is figure out who does these things that impact you. And I think, going off on a little rant at this point, I think that's one thing SEOs don't do well. We either don't want to share, or we just and I'm putting myself in there, we like to tell people this is broken, go fix it. Sometimes we don't explain why it's broken, or we don't do preventative maintenance. And this is one of the things that I'm suggesting, is that find who makes and controls the templates, and to say, how do you come up with the idea for this template? Another thing that I see more and more people using is, this idea of a missed opportunity matrix. And that's what I used to use at IBM to say, look, there's X amount of searches for this. We're either here or not here. And I think the most powerful thing, like really page one of that deck that you said you show them over coffee, is here's the results page for a query of something we do. And A, we're either not there, and do you think we should? And B, we're there, but this is how we're represented. And those are, I think, very powerful ways for someone senior to say, that's not optimal. Let's find a way to fix this. And And I think, one of the big points from all this has been sharing a little bit of data. And Cindy, back to your migration, I think I remember one of the things that you had to put together, was sort of a model of, okay, if we can't redirect anything, so we're taking literally half of this website and we're putting it on a new website, and we want to continue to still do business, but we may not have the ability to do redirects. So the first thing you had to do is, basically build something to say, here's the impact.
Right.
And I think it all comes down to data. So building a simple matrix that says, look, if we lose all this equity and all this value and all this stuff, because remember, as Bill said, not many people understand the gorpy details of SEO. And you just tell them, look, everybody that's on our mailing list, if they all of a sudden lose our email address or our phone number or whatever, we may never be able to contact them again. And I think using something simple like that. So using that kind of data, I think is really, really important. Now let's spin this. So we sort of went through the matrix of how do we take big company practices and apply them to the people with no budgets or smaller teams or no team. How do we take some of the things I find, the opposite maybe fallacy is that small companies can be more nimble. So Bill, you have coffee with the CEO or the owner of the company. Maybe they're not even a proper CEO, but they own the company. They're the mover and shaker. They can command people to do things. What are some things that we can take from that size project and maybe adapt it on the enterprise side?
Yes. So there's tons and tons of great information locked up in people's computers. Especially when you're working with a small company, you'll find out they have like 1% of the content on their website. They have 99% of the great content locked up in letters and white papers and things that never see the light of Google. And those things surface themselves when you're having conversations with product managers, and when you so if you could get to typically my process would be go to a product manager, find out from the product manager who's their best sales guy, go to the sales guy, take both of their information and put together a plan. But sales guys create their own content that no one else ever sees also. And that's just, a no-brainer to take that information and either repurpose it yourself if you're working with a small company, or have someone internally understand how to write that stuff for SEO.
And I think, I think along those lines, sometimes big companies have too much content, or they've got that arrogant voice and maybe they're not nimble. So maybe we can look at, like you said, let's take some of this valuable content, that precious content that we've scraped together as the little guy, and maybe we can do that. I think similar to what Cindy was describing with, the what is content, and things like that. So content. So we hear a lot about this, and I think, probably 50% of the SEOs now sort of aren't SEOs, but they're content managers or content creation people. It was an interesting stat somebody posted recently on how the number of people with SEO in their sort of title on LinkedIn had declined, but the number of people that were content people went up. So we're pumping out content. So one of the things, Cindy, I remember that you worked on was some content quality standards. And I think the most brilliant thing about this was, and what I tried to tell people as well, is let's stop talking about SEO. So in your case, you looked out, said, look, we check a lot of things. We check trademarks, we check spellings, we check, links to privacy and all the rules that we have. We even have rules that we check around accessibility. So there's a whole lot of checking going on. And I remember you telling me there was a variety of tools that you used to do that. And so you needed to do checking, just like we use all the tools to check, is there a title, is there a header, is there all this stuff. So how can we think about checking stuff outside of just, so it's a two-part question. Part one is, how should SEOs think about checking stuff beyond SEO things? And then two, if we're not able to afford tools, so going back to our no money, no budget type thing, but we need tools to do our job, what is a way, if we're checking other stuff, that we might be able to get, SEO checks included? Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
Is that directed at me?
It was to Cindy, but I don't know if we lost her voice. Oh, we can't hear you, Cindy. So Bill, do you want to take it while Cindy's checking her mic?
Well, I guess it's different in a small company versus a big company. In a small company, what I always try to do is I always try to put them through a training. So basic trainings, understanding how Google SERPs show the information they show, why they show the information they show. I try to get deep into the intent, and then start to get into the technical reasons as to how you rank. And so, I mean, for me, for small companies, it's basically just a Word doc. It's, so a 15-point checklist of things that should take place. And then usually what I would do is have them get ready to post it, send me a link, I would review it, and then give them feedback and reasons why. In a big company, like you said, there's processes and rules for everything. If you could get into the marketing communications group that creates that kind of stuff, I think if you could formalize that is one way to get it done. I haven't had the luxury of building tools, but I'm sure you could probably automate 80% of that.
So Cindy, can you see if we can hear you? No, we still can't hear you. Try the setting up at the top, make sure it didn't switch. So what I'll do is I know a little bit about what you did. So Cindy went around and found out that they were using about a half dozen tools. There was a tool that crawled the website to basically to collect URLs to put into their site search. There was a tool that took URLs, that looked at URLs to make sure that the HP trademark was listed on a page, that the right graphic for even the header graphic was correct. And so, they were using all these different tools. And what she did is she found one of the tools in there was to find that you could add checks to it. So she simply said, well, let me write these in there. And so they were able to check things like titles and headers. They were able to check things like, now we can check schema and a lot of those type of things. And then in addition to that, if I remember, one of the best things that she was able to get, since now they were checking all these things and they were official standards, we didn't want them to be SEO things. We wanted them to be web quality. And so, Cindy, do we got you back?
I don't know. Am I back?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good.
Yes. So I think I'll just finish that sentence. So you come up with a web quality scorecard that, and I think this was brilliant, that by removing all the SEO stigma, if you will, right, you were able to get your SEO things checked as part of that. And then ultimately, you found that you were able to use some SEO tools to replace some of these others. So by playing with others and getting these as part of a diagnostic check through any means necessary was good. But I think the second part of this was because there was a czar or a gatekeeper, if you will, that mandated all these other things. So the branding standards and the accessibility standards, you just got that manager to also be the governance manager for the SEO bits. So do you want to tell us a little bit about how successful that was for you?
Yeah, so what was really cool was when we implemented these checkpoints, we had gotten buy-in from the czar, but also had buy-in from all of those different disciplines around the company as far as what checkpoints we were adding before a page went live. But the problem we had is at the time we had a site that was old and had a lot of legacy pages that did not lend themselves well for current SEO practices, let alone accessibility or any of the other disciplines. And so when a page would go live, uh, there were several errors, and even with these checkpoints, people were just passing pages through to go live because there were just too many errors on the page. So we went to the czar and said, hey, we really need to make this mandatory. And what they did is they put in place a guide within the company that we're going to have an objective that you have to get certain amount of these errors corrected by the end of the quarter. And so this was a good way for everybody to kind of be in competition with one another. We had different countries competing against other countries to have the best scores on the web by the end of the quarter. And by the end of this time, even though we used a tool, we ended up being able to just use a checklist that people could just manually look at on their desk. It was just a real simple chart that they could look at and know before they even sent it to the publishers to be published that it was meeting all of those standards that we wanted. So people got very educated by having these standard checks, and I think the competition or the little play that we were doing during that quarter really emphasized how important all of these checkpoints were, not just SEO. And it got us a seat at the table because all of a sudden now all these groups understood that it wasn't just accessibility or if their area was UX, it also included SEO in another area. So it was really great, and it helped
Mhm.
us all.
And I think this is one of these. So going back to our free, cheap, we don't have any budget. It doesn't sound like other than any cost to add you to the tool and the time to do the education. This didn't cost you anything.
No.
And so the nice thing about, again, this idea of a seat at the table is now the person creating the content is thinking about, there's things they had to think about already. And I think this is a big missing piece for a lot of SEOs, is that there are things that are already managed or mandated. And we've called this SEO judo, or corporate judo, where you use your corporate regulations to your advantage. So it sounds like, by getting these people to understand this, a good portion of what would have had to be fixed later is actually working after the fact. So I think that's good. And it goes back to, Bill, your point of creating some of these checklists, sharing them with people, giving them to the different people to say, hey, did you think about this? Did you think about these things? Before I move into the next one, we actually got, go ahead, Bill.
We've also used gamification, which helps a lot. It makes things move easier, I think, and definitely raises awareness, especially when there's competition. So we had done something similar, but it was manual process where we got management because we had so many old product pages on the site that were lacking information. We got management to agree that all the product pages needed to meet a certain standard. So we actually created a contest out of it. So it was by product team. We had product teams. We basically broke up the products into product teams, and we gave an original score and a finishing score, and minimum requirements, like you needed a case study, you needed to have a brochure, it had to have the features, it had to have the benefits, and it had to have You had to find areas on the site outside of your normal navigation to build links back to the page.
Mm-hmm.
And on a weekly basis, we shared that. And then in the end, it was more about getting the work done. But in the end, basically, we showed the additional traffic and conversions that were created. And that created a great incentive for people to understand why it's important to have content and the types of content on it. And then from there, we actually went into a SEO contest for all the content writers. So I picked out 3 pages that were on page 2 for each of the people that were responsible for that area. And, we actually had monetary gifts. So we had like $50 credit card gift cards and things like that we would give out on a weekly basis to the winners. And like I said, people that are competitive, they're competitive. So even if it works for 50% of the people, you get a lot done with a little bit of money.
So I'm going to segue. We're starting to get a bunch of questions for people now. We're at about 10 minutes left. So I want to try to touch on a few of these. But Bill, you made a great point, incentives. I'll give you an example. I worked on a project and they had like 8 or 9 MBA interns. So not, low level, like really brilliant interns. And what we found was they weren't interested in like pizzas or a $50 gift card. They wanted access. And so what we did was we created a contest like that where whoever had the most gains, they were getting real world marketing experience. We were teaching them about search, about digital and things like that. But they wanted access to like the CMO, if they could get, or the owner, so that was an interesting thing where, just a simple gift card was great. But a couple of the questions we've got is, okay, free. What can I do for free? What are the resources? Well, setting up a meeting with someone and it's cost basically a lunch, that type of thing, can be relatively expensive. I want to circle back to this idea of free because there are some things you can do. You can use Google Search Console, which is free. One thing that I tell people, there's a process that I've used called 30 minutes to search greatness. I go to Google Search Console, I search for words, sort by words that are ranking in the top 5 and not getting many clicks. That means that I'm ranking well, but nobody's clicking. And if I look at the snippet, it's usually crap. And so that's something I can identify and potentially fix for free. Another thing that's free, I think both Cindy and Bill, you touched on, is education. Mm-hmm. Getting whomever is touching the web to learn about it. Another simple one, somebody was asking about links. I think, talking to your PR team, your external relations team. Now, you may not be big enough to have it, but somebody's doing some sort of outreach, getting them to link to you. Partners. We find a lot of times big companies, small, you're selling to somebody. Ask partners.
And purchasers.
And purchasers. Yeah. Ask them, to link to you. I think that that's far more valuable in many cases than like guest blogging. I mean, you can if you got time, but if you're already scrapping for things that you don't have time to do, the ideas of writing some of this stuff may or may not work. So I think that's sort of a challenge. But if you can do it, if you can commit the time and you can find someplace relevant to get that, I think that really works. Another question we got, so Cindy, as we were talking about the links, there was one person that could not believe we couldn't get the redirects. So there's a 2-part question that they asked. Number one was, yes, there are cases when you do a divestiture, it's sort of, let's replace divestiture with divorce. So it's like you're getting a divorce. It may or may not be amicable. And you call your ex-spouse and say, can you forward my mail? Well, if you had a good breakup, they'll probably forward it to you or drop it off when they come to see the kids. If you didn't, they're not even going to answer your call. And I think there's cases where, and then perpetuity. Yeah. So let's say we've got 42 million links that we got to send to the other half of the company. Again, we're back in the enterprise problems. 40 million links that we had across, the half of the content that was migrating. How do you even manage that? Now, this is not benefiting you at all in the future.
Right.
And so I think this is one of the things. Yes, 301 still very much work, but they have to reside somewhere. And it's like getting the divorce and asking your ex-spouse to keep all your stuff in the garage or in the attic. Probably not going to happen.
And
So what did you do, Cindy?
Yeah, so we did do the initial 301 redirects, right? We got as many as we could, and we weren't able to do a one-to-one mapping for all of our pages, but at least the ones with high search volume or natural traffic, we did get one-to-one mappings for those. But then over time, just as anything, like it's not going to last forever. And so within a couple year period, our contract ended on the other side where they would handle our links. And so just for an example, like our domain authority went from like being 94 to 60 in a day just by losing all of those links that had been coming into our site. It took us a good year to bring it back up into the high 80s. So I, we did the best we could. We got as many over as soon as we could, trying to save as much link equity that we could. But again, they aren't going to keep, a whole lot of links on their side and be responsible for that for forever.
So we just got a question here. I think it might actually be a great way to wrap this up today. It's how do you manage information sharing and SEO alignment across large teams, especially when different SEOs have different views on ranking factors? So that's an interesting one. So we'll hear from both of you. So Cindy, you're in charge. So you're, I guess, the decider in the end, which factor you use. So in your role like that, what have you done to try to sort of moderate between people that might have different views or have read different things?
Right. So one of the things that we did at HPE was to actually centralize the SEO team so that anybody that had their own ideas throughout the company, let's say a country manager had their own ideas what SEO meant, they would have to come through us to get approval to do whatever it is that they were thinking. And we basically hold the keys to the kingdom of SEO at HPE. So we hold the rules and the regulations. We document these. We have standards in place. And anyone that wants to change those is welcome to come to us and talk to us and see if maybe we missed something or something new changed that we hadn't quite gotten there yet, right? There could be that there was a change made and we just haven't implemented what we needed to yet. But it helps to have collaboration amongst everyone. We actually have a keyword list of every keyword that we have on the site, what page they belong to, and we roll this out to every person that does content on the site so that nobody is cannibalizing each other. So I think governance is a really big thing, and it took us a long time to get there, but it really helps to avoid these I think it goes this way. No, I think it, and where does this keyword belong and that sort of thing.
But even the practice, it's like some people say title tags matter or H tags matter. And I think testing those things and coming up with, like you said, collaboration between people. Bill, I have a question for you. So it's a two-part question that we've got from people. I know you've got a great answer on how do you sort out who's right or wrong about the SEO nuances, but this one I think is for you. So this person has been working on a big site. They had a massive traffic drop. And they were providing them both ranking data and a variety of data as part of their consulting contract. But the question is, as a contractor or as a freelancer or as an SEO like yourself at an agency, how much can you give for free? or how do you structure that? Because the question is, a lot of people do packages, and a package may not include data or analysis or things like that. So how do you deal with that? And you talked a lot about sharing. Here's what's broken. Here's some data, but how do you balance getting compensated for that if you're paying for different tools, etc.? So I guess what's that? What do you give for free? How do you package it? How could someone package it? And what should maybe business owners expect to get from you from a data standpoint within your price point or for free?
Well, I always try to go with a retainer. So as priorities shift, my work shifts. What do I give away for free? I would give away work that would help the person when they need the help. Like if there were no time left and there was something critical that they needed, I would probably do that work for free within that month. Maybe slack off a little bit more the month after. I always try to basically make the person that I'm working for successful. So, being my own boss, it's not uncommon for me to work late in the night sometimes to get something fixed that either maybe I didn't realize was going to be a problem, or I had to do some research on that I shouldn't be charging the customer for. So, make them successful, make them happy, hopefully long-term relationships.
Great. Yeah. So as much as necessary to, make them successful and happy within the bounds of what you're being compensated to do. So that takes us right to the top of the hour. I want to thank both of the wonderful guests for an amazing discussion. Hopefully we did touch on large company, small company, medium company. And with that, we'd like to say thanks to you guys for listening in. We're going to incorporate some of these questions into some of the future sessions where we're just trying to talk about some of the other stuff related to SEO that never gets the light of day. So again, I want to thank both Cindy and Bill for your time today, and look forward to seeing everyone else on the next episode. So thank you.